Anyways, with the rest of Lan's friends having now recovered from being gassed, well, they're trying to keep their minds off of the state of their navies. Thus, it suggested that they take a beach trip. But for some reason, that trip takes them out to the otherwise abandoned island of Oran, that the story says is 2 hours travel off the coast of the country. Which actually brings up a few notable story plot holes. Namely that the game has you come back to this freaking island a lot. Lots of events and people necessitate you return to Oran in very dire straits. So when you don't have the time to lose on something amidst a crisis, you end up needing to suddenly drop everything and chart a 2-hour trip to an island to find whatever you need to do, then get back on the boat and travel back to the mainland, which is another 2 hours lost, before you can then progress on something else. Yeah, the game does that transit instantly, but in-universe, especially with how easy it is to transit to locations via cyberspace, it's a bit silly. Made more laughable in that the Oran area jack-in points are actually the best to use as a transit hub when you're trying to traverse the larger network areas for a fair portion of the game. Battle Network 5's network is divided into ACDC, Oran, Scilab, End, and Undernet areas, and while you eventually get access to each region from a region-specific homepage, it's actually very deep into the game before they open you up to faster travel like that. Meaning jacking in at Oran, which is canonically a 2-hour trip there, is the fastest and simplest way to get where you need to go online. That doesn't even change much in the post-game, when you hit up every network area to track down each Navi's ghost data. It is in fact recommended you start your hunts in Oran, as it's fastest to go to Oran, hit the ones in ACDC's net, jack out, change routes to a second Oran path that leads to the Scilab ghost Navis, jack out, and then take the third path to head into the End area and Undernet. Jack out, and then repeat from the top to then go fight the random encounter ghosts. It actually does cut down game travel time immensely to go about doing it that way. Regardless, Lan being asked to keep his anti-Nebula agent status on the down low ends up messing with his time off with his friends. Which once more, with how the Access anime aired before this, I can't help but think there was some back adaptation to its plot points, depending on how much Battle Network 5's development team were aware of what Access was doing. However, if you're playing the Twin Leaders version of the game, you also get access to an additional gameplay system, the Party Battle System. This is another additional gameplay mechanic that was part of the GBA versions of Battle Network 5, which we could not access. You all remember my explanation of the Battleship Gate before, right? How it allowed Battle Network 4 players to operate Megaman like he was in the anime, as a self-functioning AI you sent battleships to? Well, Battle Network 5 took that a bit farther. By inserting the teammate-associated battleship, you could actually swap which NetNavi you were using in battle, tagging out Megaman so he was more fresh for fights, or to just have fun playing as a different Navi. The party battle system in Twin Leaders was thus a re-implementation of that expansion as additional core content to make it playable by those who didn't possess the Battleship Gate, primarily because the Nintendo DS was incompatible with all of the Game Boy Advance's periphery items. This is also why Base Cross was a standard unlockable for anyone that slotted in a Battle Network 5 cartridge into Twin Leaders, as the DS couldn't connect to and use the e-reader cards. Well, that and the e-reader card that unlocked Base Cross was an exclusive promotional card only originally accessible by going to see the movie when said film was in theaters. And while that film set a box office record for its release week, you really shouldn't have chase cards or accessories be exclusive to going to see a movie. Anyways, how the system was implemented in Twin Leaders was via the use of the touchscreen. Tap the Navi you want to battle with, and they swap in, being just as playable as the version you use in Liberation missions, which on top of allowing Mega Man backup at any time, also allowed you to learn those specific Navi's gameplay mechanics outside of battle as needed. The PBS Navis could also have their stats and abilities augmented through the use of exclusive customizer programs, of particular note being Party Support, where the Navi equipped with the program would appear on screen during specific activation windows and assist the active Navi in battle. Made even better, that if you change Navis when the Navi on the field is in full synchro, then before the Navis trade places, they can trigger a special team attack that acts the same as a Navi program advance from the earlier games. In specific, if Mega Man is in full synchro and you swap him with Proto Man or vice versa, then it can trigger their tried and true double hero team attack, making it so that attack then becomes featured in 5 of the 6 mainline Battle Network games. Because of that, I usually left the Battle Support program on Proto-Man and Colonel, as even when Double Hero and Colonel's equivalent team attack wasn't triggering, then they'd still dive in at the beginning of every turn to do additional damage. Each pretty much acts as a free use of a Navi chip, and with the reduction of available Mega Chips due to base cross and the fact it resets every turn with them, it makes it much faster to get high Buster rankings with which to more quickly collect the chips in-game. Most of the time. Not every party Navi has the most useful abilities, though. Hell, some can actually interfere with gameplay. When I put the support program on Nightman, who's showing up soon, it caused him to block every hit I would have taken, and thus I'd take no damage. But often that block would prevent me from doing anything. So I got stuck in a cycle where I couldn't do anything when I needed to, and thus my Buster rating went down. It's overall just better to rely on that program for just additional attacks or peripheral support, and not replacing your defensive strategies where all you really need is anti-damage and invisible battle chips. Still, the party battle system isn't usable with everything. Any major story event shuts the thing down to preserve the original difficulty curve of the game. Its biggest use is just removing the grind from the game's mandatory grind, and once more, that's the big bonus of playing the Twin Leaders version. The grind in the Battle Network games has long been its largest criticism, and yet here they've done as much as they reasonably could to remove that hindrance. With this in hand, Lan and Mega Man are instructed to check out the repairs to AC/DC's network in order to prepare for their next operation in the Oran area, and that again amidst Lan and friends getting to having fun on the island. The team leader calling the pair once more to actually jack into the Oran network to see what the defenses of the controlled area is like. Unfortunately, the Oran's contested area is now guarded by a set of digital miniguns, and neither available Navi has the defense stats on them to withstand suppressing fire, thus forcing them to retreat. This ends up the cycle repeated for each recruitment in the game. There's some new obstacle guarding the next encroaching field where a liberation mission takes place, requiring the recruitment of another operator and Navi to bolster the forces and get past it. In this case, they need a defensive Navi. And sure enough, one makes its appearance from the fold of an enemy faction. For as Lan, at least after an email that returns Mega Man's Navi customizer to us, returns to having fun with his friends as there's nothing that can be done on the mission front right now, Dex decides that the group of 4 should go and explore an abandoned mine that is also situated on the island. If there's a mine on this island, then shouldn't that logically mean that there's a small village and town that should have been here to provide services to those working in the mine? Like food, rest, accommodations, toiletries, a bathhouse. That happens with any place that provides resources. Stuff like that makes itself available to support what is supplied. Take a look at all the towns that sprung up around purported gold, silver, copper, and iron veins. Like, if this mine was just on an isolated peninsula of the country, then that would make sense for why the best way to get here would be by boat, and why so many people would end up here throughout the game. But if this is truly isolated on an empty, abandoned island, then there's a lot of questions about what's here. But as you'd expect, Lan's friends drop into the depths of the mine as a sinkhole opens up, requiring Lan enter the mine to try and rescue them. Make sure you have 1,000 Zenny though, as you need to go online at a specific jack-in point outside the mine to get a key from an old Navi that'll let you in past the security doors installed specifically to keep people out. But unfortunately, someone else seems to have bought that same key, as when you dive deeper underground, the mine starts to rumble. Rocks begin to fall on Dex, Yai, and Mail, and eventually we find a giant excavating tool coming down right atop their heads, controlled by Princess Pride and Team Colonel, and Tesla Magnets, daughter of Gauss Magnets, in Team Proto-Man, with both bearing connection to Battle Network 2's story and the organization Gospel. Though to say Pride is in control is a bit of a misnomer, the game seeming to take a cue from the anime once again, in having Nightman actually going on a rampage, just like in the second episode of the anime that Pride and Nightman appeared in. And to contrast Pride as well against her prior characterization in the games, she's panicked about Nightman losing control. It's said in this case to be because of magneto-metal, which is abundant in this mine, which Pride was working on her own to recover in another attempt to help her country through the disaster their local economy is suffering. she's not out to harm anyone here, and attempting her own redemption and reformation for her actions with Gospel by taking on this task herself, but didn't expect the Magneto Metal to mess Nightman up so much that he can't even respond to her. Thus, to help his friends and to keep Pride from having another crime on a record, they have to dive into the drill system to stop Nightman. Team Protoman's version of this is less relatable. After the events of Battle Number 2, with Goss going to prison for air terrorism, Tesla was forced to take over her father's company, and repairing the PR nightmare Goss left her with even by a simple association to him has left her beyond stressed. With the company near collapse from its now negative reputation, Tesla was left alone to recover the same Magneto Metal for their research division, and is going a bit hog-wild to take out her frustrations. And yes, she knows who Lan is, so if Lan wants to save his friends, he can do it himself and face her and Magnet Man. Tesla as a character is testy, and not help that Stream made her a recurring boss antagonist for an extended stretch of its story. This makes sense in how the .exe anime had burned through most of its available antagonists already, and the games hadn't exactly been supplying a lot of new antagonists to make use of. Thus, Stream decided to mix things up, and, thanks to most of the Battle Number 3 enemy operators not having been used, Tesla formed Neo World 3 using them as her subordinates. Her doing this also makes sense in universe due to her dad's obsession with Dr. Wily clearly leaking over onto her, and wanting to one-up her dad's job by succeeding where he and Wily failed with her and her subordinates' own schemes. And while that has some valid reasoning behind it, unfortunately a lot of episodes relating to Tesla and Neo World 3 were not well executed. If you were watching my coverage of the Rockman.exe anime before I had to take some of those videos down, then you know whom among the writing staff are the ones with suspect quality by now, so I'll leave that alone. Suffice it to say, while Pride is a breath of fresh air with how she's presented and appeals to anyone who saw her in the anime, Tesla is an acquired taste on both sides of the media. The most she honestly has going for her being her slow burn romance with the character Charlie, who we will meet later. To fight Nightman and Magnet Man, however, we need to dive through the drill computer, which after you talk to a Mr. Program to give you a sub-program, involves literally smashing rocks to traverse the internal conveyors of the drill computer's maps. Some rocks are so hard, however, that it'll take multiple hits, and depending on where you are, you might not have the time to break them, particularly if you and the rock are both on conveyors. So when that happens, you just need to take a chance to dodge onto adjacent platforms to get around. With each section of the drill computer cleared, the drill spins slower, allowing Lan's friends more of a chance to breathe, until finally we can confront the Navi at the end. Magnet Man is of course the easier of the two, especially since I'm New Game Plus with wood elemental chips in my folder. If you've played or remember the review of Battle Number 2, Magnet Man plays the same as from there, though the setup of the magnet panels around him is different than what BN2 pulled. Nightman is much the same for that matter, for the most part, unechoing how the character worked in Battle Number 2, only updated visually a bit more in regards to his mechanics. He still spends most of his battle in an invincible state, but he can't attack during it, and it's much better to try tracking his invincibility frames here than it was before. His attacks remain straightforward, either throwing his royal wrecking ball at you, or dropping bricks that crack panels. Either way though, when you win, Lan's friends are freed. And having seen the power these Navis have, in their defensive stats, Lan asks if their operators want to help take the fight to Nebula. Pride, in apology for what happened before, wholeheartedly agrees. Tesla, though, takes some convincing and enticing in the form of having something to vent her stress against, since Nebula's not made her job or salvaging Goss's mess any easier. Either way, the Navi from this incident becomes the defense-statted member of the team, and uses said skills to guard the other Navis from the artillery fire long enough for the others to destroy the encampment, and beginning the next liberation mission. Though heading the control of this area is our old nemesis, Shade Man, revived from the dead thanks to the power of Dark Aura once more. Because of course the Dracula equivalent would come back from the dead. Just being animized by the pile driver last game really was not enough. Here is where we get another upgrade to play in Team Leaders though, the Transfer Party or TP chip. This special chip allows you to convert one party Navi into its equivalent in the other game. here can be used to change Proto-Man into Colonel, or more usefully, Magnet Man into Nightman. This is dead useful when playing Liberation missions because, well, Magnet Man sucks at his assigned role. His magnet barrier, which protects party members close to him, requires an order point to use, meaning every time you use it, you have fewer order points to spend on any other ability. Nightman, by comparison, has his invincible defensive ability as a built-in, cost-free skill that protects him and those around him from overworld map attacks. In battle, not so much, but this kind of thing is why the TP chip was implemented. Now, admittedly, you have a very small supply of the TP chips, so it's not like you can do this for all the team party members, and you can only trade them out once per turn. But if you're playing the Proto-Man version and have to suffer the complete uselessness of 2 of the battle party members, now you have the option of trading them out. This map also introduces the Tin Hawk viruses, which can traverse all the dark panels rapidly to strike our navies on the overworld and deplete our health without getting into a battle. Combo this with Shademan bearing the same ability by fading in and out of the shadows, and it makes sense why a defensive Navi would be needed. So the strat for this field is to keep the group of Navis close, while step-by-step clearing a path to Shademan. The Tin Hawks stick around for later maps, but Shademan is the real problem here. Much like Magnet Man and Nightman, however, Shademan has nothing new to his arsenal. If you learned his mechanics during the 6 playthroughs of Battle Network 4, where you had to fight him a total of 24 times? He's no major challenge. With a defensive Navi and his operator subsequently staying on with the team to fight Nebula. And the camaraderie formed, subsequently reviving Double Soul for the game, with Mega Man's far easier acquisition of Magnet Soul and Team Proto-Man, and Night Soul and Colonel. Time passes, and on a following day, as the kids are looking for something to do while Land's on standby, we get accosted by one of 2 suspicious characters. Charlie, operator of Gyro Man, and Dark Miyabi, the long mysterious operator of our long-time recurring ninja foil, Shadow Man. Both insult Mega Man and Land's capabilities as operators, challenging the brothers to face off against them inside the AC/DC Squirrel. Stop laughing! And several squares later, where, if you take all the wrong paths you can collect a bunch of items, you get to confront their respective navies. In Team Colonel, Mega Man and Land immediately realizing the danger they're in by seeing their off and on again contracted assassin foe. Team Proto-Man with Gyro Man, not so much. In part because much of Charlie's persona comes off as kind of arrogant and risk-taking. In both versions, though, the point behind their challenge is that Mega Man's too slow to really be able to deal with them. Gyro Man because he can change into a nimble helicopter, and Shadow Man because, well, ninja. To make matters worse, they're not the only one that they're accosting, but that's for later. Before that, Higsby's chip shop is open once again, with a number of good chips to grab, including everything in the number trader. But also behind the shop is an odd man with an odd chip for sale. Specifically, a dark chip. Unlike last game, where Mega Man's only interaction with a dark chip is the data for one they obtain digitally, in this game that mechanic has been completely removed, making it so the only way to use a dark chip is for you to find it in the wild and then put it in the folder. No temptation to the dark side nonsense this time, meaning while players once more have the option to use them, for the rest of us who don't want to damage Mega Man's HP pool, we can just ignore them. Bar one aspect of play I'll discuss later, but I don't use that either. Regardless, you're called to go around again to make sure the recently liberated region is secure from Nebula forces, which it isn't. 6 Nebula agents are scattered throughout its 3 regions and are looking for a fight, requiring their deletion to resecure the area. With that done, your mission's updated to check up on the state of Scilab's network areas, which are themselves barricaded by a dark chip-powered row of clouds, which once more the present navies can't traverse. Unfortunately, no one thinks about contacting the nimble navied operators to see if they might want help with the challenge, and there's a reason for that. Namely, they're already under contract. After Land takes a nap, your defensive Navi operator calls you in a panic back to Oran, Gyro Man/Shadow Man having attacked and defeated them, and they need help recovering the programs that make their navies run. On the island, however, you once more can come across Mr. Famous and his newest Navi, Gridman. I have literally been waiting since I began these reviews to make that joke. Yes, they were planned as early as 2016. Only made easier by the fact that Gridman's seen a revival in recent years as a damn good anime from Studio Trigger. Unfortunately, it is not that Gridman. Gridman is instead a football-based Navi designed after a linebacker, with him being able to make like Shadow Man and clone himself a full team. The Navi was actually a contest submission for a .exe first original Navi, and the one that ultimately won that contest due to how the original artist incorporated the design of a football into the Navi's body. In Japan, though, the Navi is officially named Footman, because the name Gridman is trademarked by Tsuburaya for the aforereferenced digital AI Ultra superhero. No such trademark existed at the time in Western markets. Thus why the character could be renamed such without issue. But yeah, main quest. Each of the defensive Navi's core programs can be found by re-entering the drill computer and fighting through them once again to grab the program from where you previously turned off the damn things. It's just a fetch quest. Made both easy and yet frustrating by how the rock system in each drill computer is turned off. So it is easier to traverse again, but frustrating in that the drill crusher is in the deepest depths of the Oran Mine's maze, and it always takes a few long minutes to get down here, and yet the game keeps insisting on doing so. Worse, it's all a distraction. The Speed Navi actually having gone over to Scilab to bug your team leader, who claims to have fought them off solo. Before we can grill them more on that though, our next Darkloid enemy, Cloudman, has made his own bid to retake Oran, drenching the Oran net with more clouds. Fortunately, a helpful Mr. Program equips Megaman with a vacuum program, whose tank can suck up these digital clouds and clear access to the squares they were holding hostage. The downside is the tank of the vacuum program can only hold about 10 white clouds, and the clouds come in a few different densities. White and gold clouds 1, gray clouds the equivalent of 3 whites, and black clouds the equivalent of 5. While you can talk to Mr. Programs to empty the tank to push progression, well, there's a lot of clouds. So keep to clearing just the ones that matter to getting you out of your path, and not every single one out there. After clearing both Oran Nets 1 and 2, you then have to do the same in Scilab as the Speed Navi taunts you once more about the slow pace you work at. And we get it, guys! Megaman's not specialized for just speed, but is a jack-of-all-trades type net Navi. Scilab, though, is the difficult part in all this. The 2 areas you cleared in Oran, just a training course for the real challenge of the clouds, as unless you take a specific path in clearing the clouds, you won't be able to traverse them as the tank just fills up too fast, without easy access to Mr. Programs this time around. Scilab 2 is the worst at this, the path having Mr. Programs, but none of them can empty the entire tank, only empty just enough clouds to get you to the next Mr. Program in the chain. If you take the wrong route, then you have to leave the area and come back to reset the entire puzzle. More than the others, this drove me batty because the Speed Navi's the only one of the cast that doesn't have a proper related region you go to for their recruitment that ties in any way to their story. The support Navi's at the end, I'll get to later, but while there's no overall location that's dedicated to them, the region they want to get into and why serves as their story region and at least is properly touched on. Here, the Speed Navi's just continuing a challenge arc and the Nebula agents just making it worse for us independently of one another. Unless we want to count the squirrel in this, and I frankly don't. Eventually we face off with Gyro Man and Shadow Man in the rear side of Scilab, them having no problems with the clouds like we did as they can either walk or fly over them without issue. Shadow Man, as you'd expect from a returning Navi, has all the same stuff we'd seen from him before. It's just his general ninja-ness that's going to screw with you. Gyro Man, on the other hand, is a wind elemental Navi that uses his transformation skill to his advantage, flying up out of your range to hit, very often, to drop bombs on you, throw his propellers around the map, and unleash a tornado arm that hits a 3-square line. And worse, the farther back from that tornado you are, the more it hurts. With their defeat, however, we finally learn who contracted them to fight us, and that person's name is our team leader, Chod and/or Barrel. The point of these challenges was to show the kinds of power we could be confronted by, which we would need to overcome. and with the speed navies bested, they're now joining up with us, showing their noble skill by vaulting over the clouds and destroying the dark chip powering them. This allows us to face Cloudman, permitting the introduction of the barrier panels I already spoiled existed when I talked about Liberation Mission 9. Fortunately, both Gyroman and Shadowman can walk on normal unoccupied panels, meaning they can't get past dark holes or panels occupied by the mid-boss enemies, making it easier to get to the barrier keys that disable the blocks in the road, or set up circumstances to shorten or bypass our way through everything. Their order point abilities are Bomb Liberation for Gyroman, which allows him to auto-liberate a dark panel he's flying over, and Sneak Attack for Shadowman, allowing him to backstab any boss-classed enemy on the field for massive damage. Both of these characters take the most advantage out of getting one-turn liberations, as when they sneak past enemy lines, they can open up easier paths of traversal than others would, as long as you know what you're doing. Most of the time, it's just smart to have them focus on speeding for the barrier keys to bring those down, while the rest of the team works their way through the dark holes, while assisting the rest by opening up traversal paths where plausible. Cloudman, once more for me, is both not a challenge and yet also an annoyance, due to his propensity to hide behind all his clouds in battle, said clouds blocking most open attacks until they're destroyed by Buster Fire, and not help that he doesn't just hide behind the clouds, but inside them. As while him hugging the back row makes him an open target to be pierced by the bamboo chip or be hit by boomerangs, when he hides in his clouds, he can end up anywhere on the map. His annoyance is completed with his Elect Storm attack, as while it can do a lot of damage, is more slow than anything, but can distract you from getting Cloudman to reveal himself to finally attack him, which during a liberation mission can do the worst thing possible to you, force you to waste valuable time between the turns, that can lead you to a default loss against him if not careful. But while the liberation mission is successful and the Hikari brothers have taken the need for speed and precision to heart, which earns them Gyro Soul and Shadow Soul respectively, Cloudman is still not done, assaulting the group one last time and abducting Megaman into Nebula's grasp. With Megaman now in Nebula's hands, he is subsequently experimented on by Nebula's other agents, leading to the return of Megaman's walk on the dark side.
お前はダークロックマン。僕はロックマンに最も惨めだし、つまりネット君の手でデリートされるという死を与えるつもりだった。
No, not him. Though we'll talk about him eventually. Hopefully. I'm still hoping I can actually keep the anime reviews up. Appropriately, Lan's not happy about losing his brother again, both team leaders being a bit brisk about the need to continue the mission. With Beryl, this makes sense. There's no personal connection there, and he's military, meaning he's had to learn to accept the loss of fellow soldiers, thus is desensitized to it. Shaw, not so much. He's seen firsthand the Hikari's connection. Thus, while he's become a far better person than he was, well, the way the story presents such isn't the best, even though he is right in these circumstances that they need Lan, and as long as Lan can stay focused on the tasks at hand, they will inevitably be able to rescue everyone Nebula's stolen from him. And I think it punctuates the development their relationship as friends and rivals has gone through amidst the games, that the temporary Navi Chad gives him that will allow Lan to continue fighting Nebula is Proto-Man himself. Chad is entrusting his own Navi to Lan because he has that much faith in Lan as an operator to do right by him. A context that isn't quite the same, nor as strong, by Beryl doing the same in lending Lan Colonel. Because let's face it, we've built a rapport and story dynamic with Chad over the years that Beryl just can't match with appearing for the first time in this game. It's one of the few things Team Proto-Man has as a game over Team Colonel, the continuing evolution of these two as characters. The downside of being lent the leader Navi for this chapter of the game, however, is you cannot collect any power-up items for Mega Man until Mega Man is back, meaning there's a fair amount of backtracking made necessary later on. At the very least, however, you can get the anti-damage asterisk chips now, as the harbor area next to this game's version of Scilab now opens, within which a kid behind a warehouse challenges you to a game of digital hide-and-seek. Find him in every place his clues lead you to, and anti-damage is yours. The current mission, though, requires the team open up the End area, which Scilab managed to isolate with a security key we need to recover from the depths of the Scilab areas. This allows us to get a bit of experience using the leader navies in normal battles. Or would if we hadn't already been doing so in the Twin Leaders version. Before we enter the End area and find Megaman taken over by a Dark Soul, and backed up by a lot of Nebula navies. So, yeah, instead of keeping the Category Queen chess piece off the board, Nebula's tried to weaponize him against us. And with the reinforcements, we're forced to retreat for now. We need someone with a lot more power to get through them all. That realization subsequently clues the team into a way to resolve this. There's a new Navi program being worked on called the Booster System, which can increase computing power immensely, and it's going up on auction to the highest bidder soon. Unfortunately, something like that would also be an open target for Nebula to try and steal, meaning we have to infiltrate the ship the showcase is taking place on, the Queen Bohemia. Sadly, we don't have an invitation. I doubt we could afford the Rhapsody.
Just a poor boy, nobody loves me.
He's just a poor boy from a poor family.
But fortunately, we know a company CEO and or royal princess that would have gotten an invitation to the event, allowing us to get on board. The ship showcases a group of eccentric characters, ultimately invoking the feeling of a locked door mystery style of tale, with you eventually needing to ferret out the Nebula agent amidst the assembled characters, and Lan being the detective in this case of whodunit in stealing the booster system. Which thus once more invokes something I often have needed to reiterate in my reviews of the anime. Lan Hikari! Not good at academics, but not an idiot. Though even the Nebula agent ends up a feint, him being unmasked and yet not being behind the booster system's theft. The actual thief? Our power-type Navi recruits. Firefox and his Navi Napalm Man in Proto Man, and Dingo and his Navi Tomahawk Man in Team Colonel. Both of them after the booster system for differing reasons. For Firefox, he is a fireworks maker both on and offline. And with the booster system, he plans to improve the power of his digital fireworks displays to help his struggling business. And before you ask, yes, Firefox's English localized name is a reference to the web browser. Mozilla Firefox was originally created as an alternative to the awfulness of Internet Explorer, now Microsoft Edge, in 2002. And even by the time this game released in the Americas in 2005, Firefox the web browser was overtaking Internet Explorer in popular use. Hell, I was using Firefox by then. His Japanese name, Nenji Rokushakudama, however, is an allusion to his job as a fireworks maker and fireworks in general, a shakudama being a type of large mortar firework. Dingo, on the other hand, has far different motivations. His home, a small village, was devastated by the corporate antics of those behind the development of the booster system. His people displaced by said company going eminent domain on their asses, just so the company could build a resort town in its place. Dingo thus intended to sabotage the use and sale of the booster system, as said project was one of their largest money sinks. If they get further financial backing to make more, his people were worried even more people would end up displaced like he was. So, Dingo acted to intervene. I'd say that doesn't exactly happen, but I've seen the bullshit corporate America polls, and I've been watching Defunctland and Yesterworld Entertainment's YouTube videos on the rise and fall of amusement parks, and how certain big business types and land barons screw over homeowners. And on top of that, tank both successful business ventures and the economies around them for their own personal gain. Which is unfortunately true across the spectrum of capitalism, so yeah, not got much to complain about with Dingo's motivations. Unfortunately, this brings us to two of the irritants of the Twin Leaders versions. Namely, the development team for the DS release decided to extend 2 of the external network maps from 3 areas to 4, making Greg Sepelak's guidebook and extensive maps basically worthless for assisting in navigation of these areas. The ship computer especially irritating in this because it's split between an above water section and a below water section that forces upon you a breath mechanic. Once you run out of breath, your HP stops getting hit unless you make like Sonic the Hedgehog and find a spot of bubbles to restore your air. Which doesn't make sense. These are AI programs. They don't breathe. I generally hate it whenever they do this, as it's just damn irritating. I mean, yeah, it's only the second time they've really done it, the first being Aquaman's storyline in Battle Network 4, but it's still not enjoyable. But as much as I'd hate to defend how Aquaman's side story was handled, at least it didn't have a huge number of obstacles. In the ship computer, you have the constant complications of both whirlpools that sap your air, and jet streams that push you around the map. Sure, some of the jet streams are supposed to be used to jump you from certain paths to others to get exclusive mystery data crystals, some of which contain the keys to get farther into the maps, but others are obstacles that prevent you from getting across them. And it's not easy at all to fight against the flow of the jet stream, in part as you need to make sure as to be pressing the directional controls directly against the flow of them to be able to stay in place. If you're off for even a microsecond imposing them, which trust me, you often will be, then you're going to be blown away, and there are several of these jet streams that double themselves up so they affect 2 rows of a map, block off a section of a path that zigs back and forth so you have to get past those same jet streams multiple times, and you have to get past this curving path of jet streams to actually progress to fighting the Power Navi. And make worse, once you get Megaman back, you have to come back here again, because not only are there HP memories to buff his stats here, but the first expansion memory for the Navi customizer that is mandatory to survive deeper in the game. Short of the Undernet and Nebula areas in the game, where at the very least they're always supposed to be hard, the ship computer is the absolute worst to work your way through because of the mandatory mechanics that never go away. I may hate going to do the things we're forced to in the drill computers, but that's more because of the long trip it even takes to get to them and back from them. As at the very least when you go through them all, the rock lines have been turned off and removed, so the only thing you have to deal with is the virus battles. The same with the gargoyle computer we'll be dealing with next. Clear the traps and puzzles and they stay shut down. Not so much here. Worse in my mind, you all know how Mega Man enemy stages tend to follow a thematic pattern. Case in point, the area you encountered Beastman and Plantman in during Battle Network 3. They match the character's theme. Bubbleman's chase tied into the area of the network relating to the beach network. Beach, water. Flame Man found in a section of the internet has been equated to a Navi hell. Thus a Navi made from the fires of hell, you got your thematic match. Sure, not every Navi perfectly matches this. Some of these certainly stretch to match a theme or puzzle. However, the entire ship encounter seems to have the same problem as Battle Network 4's varied Navi side story encounters. They don't match the region at all they occur in, even from the respect of their team roles. As little as Nightman and Magnet-Man match the mine as workers for the mine, the magneto-metal contents of the mine and the role it plays in operative labor more allowed for flexibility in stage typing, especially in a sense that some mine workers have been known to become temporarily unbalanced in the events a pocket of natural gas or some other contaminant was broken open. But a firebomber Navi and an axe-wielding tribal Navi? That doesn't match well with boat, now does it? Though Napalm Man in and of itself being used has its own questions about it. Namely from the fact that the character was previously seen in Battle Network 2 as a secret World 3 Navi that was used as a post-game boss. Does this mean that Firefox was a previous member of World 3 before the organization appeared to go defunct? Never answered, at least in the video games. In the anime, there's a whole arc which explains that, where Firefox actually stumbles across Asteroid Napalm Man, long story, not relevant for now, and bonds with him so that instead of becoming a rampaging threat to humanity, he's reformed and fights for the world and person he comes to care for. It's a pretty good tale, too, especially since the anime's version of the character was previously seen as being part of some Dark Nation faction that never really got expansion on before they got deleted. As a consequence, though, Napalm Man once more fights like he did in Battle Network 2, albeit with a far softer difficulty curve as we're not in the post-game, and showing his allegiance changed by relying a bit more on firebomb tactics to complement his Vulcan arms. But if you've slotted in any of the myriad water chips you can grab from the ship computer, he's no trouble at all. Tomahawk Man is a bit trickier, not just because you've not really had a chance to get many fire chips in this game, and the fire element not being prevalent in Battle Network 5 to begin with. And really, the only functional one for an L or S code chip folder being Bulk Bomb L or Hotbody 3S. And Bulk Bomb's worthless in L code because it requires being shot with another fire chip to set it off, which does not exist in the folder type. Kinda reminds me of the Sinnoh region in a way, where in Pokemon Generation 4, if you wanted a fire Pokemon, you were stuck with either the Fire Starter or Ponyta until very late in the game. But yeah, that lack of overt weaknesses is why Tomahawk Man is a badass in this game. The totem in his back row helps that, granting him invulnerability, healing, or ranged meter attacks if you're not shooting the thing regularly to disable it. He can throw tomahawks for ranged attacks, and his tomahawk swing hits with the range of a life sword. Add to that he also heals while on grass panels, and he is a damn effective tank. As proven after you defeat these Navis, and their operators agree to work off their crime by joining the team, while their crime is publicly blamed on the actual terrorist in their midst. I say they're getting away with it, but helping liberate the world from the control of a dark syndicate, yeah, it's going to end up being time served. Thus we return to the end area, with Napalm Man and Tomahawk Man making quick work of the Nebula agents guarding the entrance, and allowing access to the main field, and its many dark panels. Too many to economically be able to obliterate them all. Fortunately, that's where Napalm Man and Tomahawk Man's special abilities come in. Their use of order points blowing up large masses of panels per use, at the cost of destroying any items hidden in those panels with exception to barrier keys. Napalm Man's Napalm ability exploding out in a Foursquare long cross as if he were Sachiel from Evangelion. I am only just now realizing there's actually some design similarities, so maybe that was a deliberate homage. While Tomahawk Man's Tomahawk Swing once more hits as many panels as a life sword, meaning there's always going to be a trade-off. While Tomahawk Man's attacks only penetrate half as deep as Napalm Man's, it consequently allows for more safe liberations with the other Navis as they're not having to deal with the enemies gaining more spaces to play with, more tougher viruses per encounter, or boxing a Team Navi in on both sides, which are the consequences of Napalm Man by comparison. However, as I've said, if you've built your folder correctly to actually take advantage of enemies being on both sides of you, it actually makes one-turn liberations far easier to pull off, making it so you have safely burst open regions by which to infiltrate faster, deeper. Tomahawk Man's the safe option to keep hacking away at the blockades, while Napalm Man opens a path through the enemy that is high risk, high reward. Made no better on this map specifically because Megaman is in enemy hands, meaning you can't even leverage Megaman's own customized abilities and higher HP to assist in blitzing through the narrow dark panel lines. But as long as you take your time and think about how you're progressing through, it should all work out. Especially in this case, as the Dark Soul-controlled Megaman does not have the full access to everything a Dark Soul did in Battle Network 4. At worst, he might use chips you currently have slotted into your current folder and program advances registered in your PA memo. But past that, that's not a battle that gets harder for you just because you have a lot of battle chips.